What if I told you that the man many people call the father of aviation was not American, but Brazilian? Not only that, what if the first airplane flight that truly shocked the public happened not in the United States, but in Paris, in front of a crowd? For most people, the story of flight begins and ends with the Wright brothers in 1903. But in Brazil and in parts of Europe, another name still stands at the center of that story: Alberto Santos-Dumont. He was wealthy, brilliant, eccentric, and fearless. He flew balloons over Paris, crashed machines in public, and became one of the most famous men in the world. Then, in 1906, he built an aircraft called the 14Bs and entered one of history's greatest arguments: who really invented the airplane? This is the story of the Brazilian who dared to fly in public and challenge history itself. Our story begins in 1873 in Brazil. Alberto Santos-Dumont was born into a wealthy family. His father owned a large coffee plantation, and Alberto grew up surrounded not just by land and labor, but by machines, steam engines, mechanical tools, new technology. He became fascinated by movement, power, and engineering. While other children dreamed of adventure stories, Alberto was already thinking about something more radical. Could humans fly? In the late 19th century, that question was still half science, half fantasy. Balloons existed, yes, but they drifted with the wind. Controlled flight, true flight, still seemed impossible. But Santos-Dumont was not interested in what seemed impossible. He was interested in what might be built. When he moved to Paris in the 1890s, he entered the perfect city for dreamers. Before he ever became part of the airplane controversy, Santos-Dumont became famous for something else. He made flying look real. At the time, balloons were mostly floating curiosities. But Santos-Dumont wanted control. He began designing dirigibles, powered airships that could be steered. And he didn't just talk about them, he flew them. In 1901, he won international fame when he successfully flew one of his airships around the Eiffel Tower and returned within the required time to win the Deutsch Prize. This was huge. Imagine Paris seeing a man in a small, strange flying machine circling the Eiffel Tower. It looked like the future had arrived. He became a celebrity. Newspapers loved him. By the early 1900s, Alberto Santos-Dumont was not some unknown engineer working in secret. He was a global star. And then he turned to a harder challenge. Not floating, but heavier than air flight. Now here is where the story becomes truly dramatic. In 1903, the Wright brothers in the United States had already achieved powered flight at Kitty Hawk. Today, that is the widely accepted beginning of aviation. But there was a problem. Their early flights were not widely witnessed by the public. They were not instantly accepted in Europe. And to many people at the time, the proof still felt distant and private. Meanwhile, Santos-Dumont was working in Paris, where everyone could see what he was doing. In 1906, he unveiled a strange-looking aircraft called the 14Bs. It was awkward, boxy, and unlike the sleek airplanes we imagine. But Santos-Dumont believed it could fly under its own power, and most importantly, he was going to test it in public. On October 23, 1906, in front of officials and spectators, Santos-Dumont flew about 60 meters. Then, on November 12, 1906, he flew it again, this time about 220 meters. These flights were recognized by the Aero Club de France as official records. The crowd saw it, the press reported it, Europe celebrated it. But here is the twist. If Santos-Dumont flew publicly in 1906, why do history books usually give the title to the Wright brothers in 1903? Because aviation history depends on how you define the first airplane flight. The Wright brothers flew earlier, and their machine was technically more advanced in many ways. Their place in history is strongly supported by evidence and later demonstrations. But Santos-Dumont's supporters argue something different. They say his 14Bs took off in public, under its own power, without the launch assistance that people associated with the Wright experiments. Is the inventor the first person to do it, even if almost nobody sees it? Or is it the first person to prove it publicly, in a way the world can recognize. In Brazil, Santos-Dumont is still honored as the true father of aviation. But Santos-Dumont was more than a challenger. He helped make aviation feel possible. He turned invention into a public event and was known for being unusually open with his ideas, sharing them with everyone. He designed the Demoiselle, one of the first practical light aircraft, and published the plans for free. He wanted the dream of flight to belong to all of humanity, not just a few. Yet his later life was far more tragic. As aviation developed, airplanes became more powerful and eventually more militarized. What had been a dream of human progress also became a tool of war. For a man who had imagined flight as something noble and uplifting, this was painful to witness. Santos-Dumont's final years were marked by declining health and sadness. He died in 1932. So, who really invented the airplane? If you ask most history books, the answer is the Wright brothers. If you ask Brazil, the answer is Alberto Santos-Dumont. And maybe that is exactly why this story still matters. History is not always a simple list of winners. Sometimes it is a battle over memory, over what counts, what gets seen, and who gets celebrated. What Santos-Dumont achieved in 1906 was a spectacle and a proof. He taught humanity to believe that flying was possible. And once the world believed that, there was no going back. Subscribe for more forgotten stories that change the world. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more incredible stories from history.